Hello, everybody, and welcome to the No BS Zone. I'm Bernie Goldberg. I'm here with John Daly in Colorado. How you doing, John?
I'm doing good. How about you, Bernie?
Good. Today, April 30th, Wednesday, April 30th, marks the 100th day of the Trump second term. And it's a traditional day, 100 days is, for saying, how's it going? Let's assess his presidency. Well, if you're laughing because if the polls are any indication, John, it is not going very well. Drudge Report has a big headline, historically unpopular, lowest approval ratings in 80 years. The Washington Post ABC News poll has his approval at 39% with a disapproval of 55%. The previous low, the record he beats, is his own in 2017, which was 42%. This is not going well for Donald Trump. By the way, for what it's worth, he still beats Democrats in Congress in terms of trust to handle the nation's main problems. But this is not good for Donald Trump. And if it continues, if he doesn't turn it around, and frankly, it may be too late to turn it around in the mind of voters, but if he doesn't turn it around, all those GOP congressmen, all those sycophants, all those cowards who went along with everything he ever said and did, they will jump ship, I think. They will look out for number one, and number one isn't Donald Trump. Number one is going to be their own political future. I think that'll be the indication that the break with Donald Trump has begun if things don't turn around. Now, that's a big if, because knowing Donald Trump, he will, I think we've disagreed on this in the past, John, he will not be seen as a loser. That's the only thing he can't tolerate. He won't be seen as he'll do something to attempt to turn things around. If he succeeds, good for him and good for the country. If he doesn't succeed, Democrats will take the House. His presidency effectively will be over. He'll get nothing through Congress. And one more thing before I throw to you, John. I've said this before. I'm saying it now with more conviction. There's a better than 50-50 chance, a much better than 50-50 chance Democrats will impeach him. The mainstream Democrats, such as they are, will be under enormous pressure from the progressive wing of the party who thinks that they're not fighting hard enough against Trump anyway, most Democrats. And I think they'll impeach him. I think there's a very good chance that Donald Trump will be impeached if Democrats take the House. And I think there's a good chance Democrats will take the House.
Well, regarding the lowest approval, he's seen the low approval ratings. It's worth noting, and lots of people have, but the American people did not elect Donald Trump last year to wreck the global economy. They didn't. They elected him primarily. There were several reasons, but primarily because they were sick of everything costing so much. I don't think most voters, to their discredit, I don't think they listened to or understood Trump's campaign rhetoric on tariffs. I think they mostly just remembered the economy being pretty good under him last time up until the pandemic. And so they figured it would be like that again. But it hasn't been like that because unlike last time, when he delegated economic policy to smart, capable people like Paul Ryan and Gary Cohn, Trump instead launched this epic, economically illiterate trade war that destroyed a ton of wealth, created and is still creating an extraordinary amount of chaos and uncertainty, and has only driven consumer prices higher. Americans see it, they feel it, and that's why Trump's approval ratings are in the toilet. It's not because of anything the media is doing. It's all him. And the rest of the world feels this too. This stuff has jacked with their economies as well, and our allies have lost a lot of faith in us as a country, a lot of respect for us, and that's not good. In addition to the economy, I think our national honor has taken a real beating from this. America can't be relied on not to do crazy stuff like this just on a whim anymore. So And I think you're right. I think the Democrats are going to capitalize this in a very big way come next year's midterms, probably the presidency as well. But they could, you know, knowing the Democrats, they could nominate AOC and lose to whoever she runs against in 2028. But yeah, and I think you're right about the impeachment. I think the lower Trump's approval rating goes, I think the more emboldened Democrats will be to go with that. But I guess we'll see that for sure later on.
I think whether they're emboldened or not, I think the pressure on them, we're going to get in a minute, we're going to get to the Democratic identity crisis and all their problems. But to tease that, I think the majority of Democrats will be under immense pressure from the AOC wing of the party because the AOC wing of the party doesn't think the mainstream is tough. This is what we're going to discuss in a minute. They think the mainstream of the Democratic Party is weak. And I think whether Trump's poll numbers decline or stay the same or even go up, I think there's a good chance they're going to move to impeach him. Because if they don't, they're going to engage in a civil war that the mainstream doesn't want. I mean, Chuck Schumer may be primaried by AOC. That's a possibility. And if impeaching Donald Trump in the House saves mainstream Democrats from being primaried, I know the Senate only is not involved in impeachment, but I just think the pressure is going to be enormous to impeach Donald Trump. It's not exactly a prediction, but I'm saying it's a better than 50-50 chance. Now, you went through a whole bunch of things that are rightly what voters don't like and why his poll numbers are low. America's standing in the world, mainly grocery prices have not come down the way he promised. The war in Ukraine is still going. All these things that he said would happen haven't happened. But I think as a whole, it's the chaos. They're just tired of the nonstop chaos. I don't think they're against trying to make things fair in terms of trade and tariffs, but it's not working out the way they envisioned, the way Donald Trump said it would happen, that it would be so easy. You can't just do a million things in 100 days and think everything's going to go the way you planned it. Just about nothing is going the way he planned it, and think the voters are going to just say, okay, I'll wait another 100 days to see how they turn out. It isn't going well, and I think this is important, and I indicated this earlier. Even if things go better, even if his poll numbers go up, it may be too late to save Republicans next year in the midterms.
So something I just wanted to add to you. You mentioned the whole fairness word with trade fairness. And I don't think you're arguing that. Well, I'll just say what Trump's doing. It's very difficult to look at how he's imposed tariffs and how he's gone back and forth and raised them, lowered them, take it. I don't really see a lot of fairness in there, but he uses that word a lot, and I think that word fairness does resonate with people.
Yeah.
That's why that's why the Democrats for long have always talked about the rich paying their fair share. And then you and I argue, well, wait a minute, the rich people are paying more than their fair share. But it politically it works. And just to kind of go back to a point I made earlier, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I think it fits in as far as how just everyday people view politics. You and I are not everyday people. We pay very close attention to politics. Most people don't. They kind of hear certain things, they pick up on certain things. It's not always those things aren't always true. But the other day, I'm in the and you know this, Bernie. I'm in the process of helping my mom move. She's elderly, very elderly, and which is makes everything sort of difficult. We are at the cable company trying to get things transferred from one address to another. We were talking to this young guy that works there, very nice guy in his early 20s, Hispanic. I only bring that because Trump that did very well with the Hispanic demographic in this last election. But they have a little TV on the wall, Trump saying something, and my mom kind of looks. My mom doesn't like any politicians on either side, but so made some sort of eye-rolling statement. And this kid, very nice again, he, pointed out, I actually voted for him. I didn't think any of this stuff was going to happen. And,
There you go.
it's, yeah, he did. And then he kind of made, and, again, Trump ran on all this stuff, but people latch on to certain things and they don't latch on to other things. And he looked at my mom and he said, but you must be pretty happy because Trump says he's going to remove all taxes on Social Security. And I'm just thinking, he says a lot of stuff, dude, and it's not economically feasible. I didn't say any of this stuff to him. I'm thinking this in my head. I'm not going to argue politics with some kid at the Xfinity store, but yeah, that's how people they latch on. So this kid, one of the things he saw probably has a grandmother that's elderly and heard Trump say this, and that's what he attached to. He goes, well, at least this is what you're getting, even though again that doesn't make any sense. It's not going to happen. So people kind of just pick and choose what they want to hear, I guess.
Yeah, but you got to give them political savvy credit for coming
Yeah.
up with no tax on Social Security, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, because he'll propose that formally. And if Democrats oppose it because it's going to break the budget or what, I don't care what excuse they come up with or what reason they come up with, he will make it look like legitimately make it look like they're the reason that there's going to be no progress on no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. Democrats are going to be in the crosshairs on that one, and they're going to have to come up with a plan. If they oppose it, Trump wins.
And this is exactly, Bernie, we talked about this many times over the years. This is what the Democrats used to do so effectively to Republicans. They would be the Santa Claus. They promise all these goodies.
Exactly.
It would drive, yeah, and it would drive you conservatives like you and me nuts because we're like, this is not feasible. This will not work. This is just bribing people. And now Trump's doing that to the Democrats and I guess former conservatives, current Republicans are cheering him on. They think it's great. So yeah, for people that remain consistent on this stuff, it's all very frustrating because we see that politically it's a big winner. For the country, it's not a good win. It's not a good thing to do.
All right, let's move on to the Democratic Party because they have all sorts of problems. They don't know who they are. They have an identity crisis. AOC and Bernie Sanders go on tour out west and they draw very big crowds. So is AOC the future of the Republican Party? I mean, is she going to run for president? Could be, could be. Progressives, as I mentioned earlier, think that the moderates are old fogies. I know Bernie Sanders is an old fogey, but let's leave that aside. They think they're old fogies who don't have the guts to fight Donald Trump. And when you poll Democrats, they say they want to fight Donald Trump. They don't want to go along. They don't want compromise. They want to fight Donald Trump. So who's going to be the nominee in 2028? Is it going to, I don't mean necessarily who is going to be by name, but is it going to be one of the progressives? Or is it going to be somebody who we've seen 1,000 times before, Amy Klobuchar? I mean, that just yells dullness to me, yet AOC yells radical, and I don't know that America is ready for a radical. And here's a part, before I ask you what you think, John, here's a part that I find sad and pathetic. In order to look tough, Democrats are using, this is kind of funny, they're dropping F-bombs to show how tough they are. And seriously, they're dropping F-bombs and going to profanity because that shows we're tough. This is from The Hill. In recent weeks, a number of newly launched Democratic hopefuls for key House and Senate seats have pledged to, you ready for this, John? Have pledged to un-F our country. And they didn't say un-F our country, they used the whole word. Or have urged their party to drop the excuses and grow an effing spine. This is how sad and pathetic. This is like old people using hip language to show the kids that they're with it. This is like when old people used to wear bell bottoms when bell bottoms were fashionable. It doesn't work. It looks ridiculous. And I don't think Democrats are sounding tough because they're dropping F bombs to punctuate their sentences. That that's it before we move on. For me, anyway.
Yeah, no, first of all, I'm all for people uneffing the country, Bernie. But yeah, I think what this is, the Democrats have looked at Trump and they've seen that this populist demagoguery, common person shtick works on a level, and that the anger works and the looking like a fighter works, at least politically. I don't think it translates well to much else, but I think they're sort of trying to emulate it, and you're right, it doesn't always work. I mean, just kind of being this guy is sort of something Trump's been doing for a long time. It's a persona he shaped over
Well, hold on,
quite a few years.
hold on. That's exactly an important point. Trump has a dirty mouth, also, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, and I think that's what they're trying to appeal to, that type
Exactly.
of.
Exactly.
Right, right. And I just don't think it comes naturally for him, and he always gets held to a different standard because I think I've written about this before. He has sort of this celebrity protection around him. He's different. He's not your typical politician, so I think people are willing to not. And it wasn't always this case. When he first got into politics, people would flip out whenever he'd say something like that. But he's whether people like it or not, he's treated differently than like a Chuck Schumer if he were to stop dropping f bombs and start
Exactly.
mocking POWs for being captured, that sort of thing. Certain people can get away with that sort of thing apparently, but
Well, you know why? You made a very important point again. You said it comes naturally to Trump. You're right. That's the point. Trump could go into a church or a congressional prayer breakfast and say, "What the F is wrong with the Democratic Party?" And we don't, I mean, most Americans, and certainly his supporters, would say, "Well, what's the problem? He made a good point. What the F is wrong with the Democratic Party?" But when Chuck Schumer tries to do it, if he tried to do it, it wouldn't play. It'd say, wait a second, come on, that's not you. But think about it. We're saying that is Trump. That is our president. He can drop F bombs and get away with it because he's Donald Trump. Something is not right with that picture either.
no, no, I agree, but it's obviously not going to change now. We've been through this for 10 years, and it hasn't hurt him, enough anyway to make a difference. But going back to the future of the Democratic Party, I've been saying for some time, I think the Democrats would do themselves a huge favor if they moderated their positions a bit and tried to sound like sane, reasonable people. The angry progressive shtick has not been effective for them for some time, which is why people remember Kamala Harris shed a lot of that brand when she was running for president. 4 years earlier, she was that brand, but um, during the presidential election, Harris obviously lost, and I think the message taken away by a lot of committed Democrats was that one, she wasn't progressive enough, wasn't angry enough, wasn't activist enough. I think all those are the wrong messages, but AOC is now sort of stepping in to fill that role. She brings a little bit of optimism here and there, but she is, very much the activist class of Democrat. So people like AOC and even Bernie Sanders, despite he's not exactly a youthful, energetic politician, but she definitely excites the liberal base, no question about it. I don't think she has much appeal beyond that. I don't think the whole, angry, finger wagging, progressive politician has much influence beyond the base. But energizing the base is always good for a midterm. I think that's going to probably help them in the midterms. But I think it would be a bad move for the Democratic Party to shape such a person as the leader of the party. I think it's going to hurt them. I've been singing the praises of Josh Shapiro for a while. I think someone like him, doesn't have to be him, but someone like him would bring over a lot of undecideds. Bring over it would He would grow the base, the Democratic base, on a national level. I don't think AOC can.
Well, whether she can or not, give me a prediction. I know 2028 is a million years away in terms of politics, but do you think they're going to go in that direction or in a Josh Shapiro direction? By the way, I
I'm not
think
convinced.
I mentioned Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, last time. If I had to pick right now who the Democrats are going to select as their nominee, and this is crazy making a prediction that far ahead, but I'm telling you, if it's Wes Moore, I'm going to come back and take credit for being prescient about this. Wes Moore over all the other moderates. But anyway, do you think they're going to go in that direction or in the AOC direction?
I think more likely, just because, like I said, I think the parties always take the wrong message away from elections, or they haven't in quite some time. And I think there's a better chance that it would be an AOC or someone else. I don't think that's the right move. I think there's actually, Bernie, a decent. I've talked about this for a while. I think I know you've written about it for a while too. I would not be surprised to see someone completely new who hasn't been involved deeply in politics, a celebrity perhaps come in. We've talked about it for a while. I remember you gotten a lot of heat for whatever reason when you went on Fox and talked about how Oprah would probably win if she ran. I agreed with you.
Oh,
That
oh,
upset a lot of people on the right.
if Oprah ran, she'd win. I don't think there's any question about that.
I
But
don't think so either. Yeah.
who do you have in mind?
I don't really know. I mean, I think if it's gonna be a celebrity, it's not gonna be a crazy one. I think I don't see like a Sean Penn or something. I mean, but I would see, I could see like The Rock running. I could see Bradley Cooper, someone. I think he's sort of a moderate Democrat.
The
Uh,
Democrats won't let it happen. They won't let it happen.
if it's, I don't know. I think the celebrity power is more than people realize. We saw it with Trump, obviously, but and actually, I said Bradley Cooper. I meant Matthew McConaughey. Sorry about that. Who's been toying at least a little bit with the political run. But I think something
Hold
like that.
on. You know who's been toying with that, and he's really a hot commodity right now? Stephen A. Smith.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad point because I think he resonates with a lot of the regular people. I think he definitely has his following. He doesn't come across as radical. He comes across as, I think, thoughtful in many cases.
If he ran as a Republican, I'd vote for him. But
Oh,
he'd run as a Democrat. And the thing he says is, I'm a sports guy. Why am I even being considered? But the reason I'm considering it is because things are so bad that if you want a sports guy to be president, I'll keep an open mind about it. That's a very attractive argument to make.
yeah, I think that's a good point. I would not write that off. Something like that. I think there's just as good a chance of that happening as perhaps an AOC. I think both of those probably have better chances than a Josh Shapiro, unfortunately. But I hope I'm wrong on that. We'll have to see.
All right, so let's go to the end segment, the kicker, I'm giving you a warning in advance, which is ridiculous. On Jim Acosta, one of the most biased journalists of our time, Jim Acosta, formerly of CNN, his new podcast had a guest on, Chris Matthews, another winner, right? Winner, quotation marks. And Matthews compared Trump to, do you want to take a guess?
Oh, I think I know, but go ahead.
Okay, Hitler. And he said Hitler sent people out of the country away from German jurisprudence, people he didn't like. He sent them to Poland. He sent them to places where Germans didn't have jurisprudence over them. And what's Donald Trump doing? He's sending people to El Salvador, where America doesn't have jurisprudence over them. Look, you could make a strong case, and I will make a strong case for due process, that people are entitled to due process. That's not the argument we're having right now. The argument is when Democrats resort to bringing Hitler into the comparison argument, they lose the argument. Anytime you bring Hitler in as a comparison, Trump is Hitler, Ronald Reagan was Hitler, if you recall, George W. Bush was Hitler. It's a dumb argument. It demeans the memory of all the people killed by Hitler, and it's just plain stupid, and they never learn. That's the Chris Matthews is a political animal, and here he is comparing Trump to what a dope, and Jim Acosta's a dope also. And I'm trying to be kind and not drop the F-bomb on either of them.
It's funny, even now after all these years, whenever I see Chris Matthews talk, believe it or not, Bernie, there is a little bit, and not based on what we're this specific comment that he made. I always feel a little bad for Chris Matthews, and the reason is that he took so much heat several years ago for making that comment about Barack Obama about the thrill up his leg. That stuff feels like just completely irreverent journalism compared to what we see these days in the area of sycophants. But going back to what he says, um, the Hitler point he made, even if one sees specific parallels, perhaps even legitimate ones between an American leader and Adolf Hitler. Actually, comparing that leader to Hitler is not only very tacky, it's not only disrespectful, but it loses people. Like you said, it turns people off. It soils the entire argument you're trying to make, and it's never effective. It's provocative. It gets people to talk. We're talking about it. Obviously, it's something that sticks out there, and Chris Matthews is far from the only one who's made that comparison when it comes to Trump. But I think it's just such a self-defeating argument that people don't take it seriously anymore, and it would serve these individuals well if they just never did it again, if they never tried that again.
I think you're being way too kind. You say nobody takes it seriously. I think the progressive wing of the Democratic Party takes it very seriously.
Good point. Good point. I should say people who are open-minded people, perhaps. So people that are open to reasonable arguments. But yeah, no, it's a good point. I think you're right. I think a lot of progressives probably shake their head, in approval, or nod their head, I should say, in approval when they hear something like that. But I don't think it wins anybody over. I don't think it wins anybody over to an argument that wasn't already won over before that argument was made.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let me end with the plea I make to our loyal subscribers. I'm just wasting my breath because they don't even pay attention to me anymore. Tell your friends about what we do here. If they don't subscribe for them. The more people we have listening to us, the better it is for us and for them, I think. But I know I'm wasting my breath because you never do it. You just do it for me, but you don't do it.
Don't do it for me, people.
Care about
Do
all
it for
the
me.
people. You don't care about me. I get it. All right.
Hey, Kimberly, before we close, can I throw in one more thing? So I want to direct people. You wrote a really good column on Monday about 60 Minutes, sort of the behind the scenes stuff regarding this merger and everything. People should definitely check it out. I'm going to include it in the show notes. I did see, and I don't remember if it was Scott Pele or something. I can't remember if
Scott Pelley.
yeah, he made it. I guess on 60 Minutes Sunday night, he kind of drew this into the limelight, talked about what's going on and why this fellow, the head of 60 Minutes, resigned or was pushed out or whatever. Did you happen to see that, Bernie? That his comments?
No, but I know about it. He went on at the end of the show, Scott Pelley did, and said Bill Owens, our executive producer, resigned because Paramount, which is the parent company of CBS News, is sort of insinuating itself in the news process, and we don't really. It's new. It's something new, and they're doing it, which everybody acknowledges because they're trying to make a deal to sell the company, and they need the FCC's approval, and that means they need Donald Trump's approval because he runs the FCC in effect. And Donald Trump is no fan of 60 Minutes, and that's putting it mildly. Now, I don't know if there are going to be any repercussions against 60 Minutes or Scott Pelley, but yeah, I give him credit for it. But there was somebody who stood up to CBS's BS a long time ago, and
Ooh.
it was yours truly. And whether it was courageous or stupid, I did it a long time before Scott Pelley did it. I didn't do it on the Dan Rather News. They would have never let me do it on the news, but I did it in the biggest circulation newspaper at the time, the Wall Street Journal. So good for Scott Pelley. He wasn't the first. I don't want to sound immodest. Let's end with that. Thanks, everybody. Tell your friends. Do it this time for me, okay? I know I'm wasting my breath, John.
I'm gonna set up a hashtag Do It for Bernie, and then we're gonna get it trending on social media.
Right. I'm sounding pathetic asking people to do something they won't do. Okay, that's it. See you next time. Bye-bye.